ॐ भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पक्षेमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैः सुष्ठुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।
Namaskar. Good evening to everyone. I welcome you all to this panel discussion being held under the aegis of Vimarsha series of lectures that we hold every month. And the theme of today's panel discussion is Indraprastha, a capital journey. This is a very special discussion on a very special topic and being held in a panel discussion format. As you all know, Delhi has a long history and its origins go back to the times of probably Mahabharata and the ancient city of Indraprastha, which is mentioned in Mahabharata and established by the Pandavas. So Delhi is almost as old as India in that sense. And this is where Yudhishthira was coronated and in the presence of more than 100 kings whose names are all mentioned, I believe, in the Mahabharata. I think there is a need to discuss this subject in depth. And I'm most grateful to Madam Neera Mishra for helping us organize this panel discussion this evening and to discuss the journey of this capital city starting from the Indraprastha days. And she has put together a fantastic panel. She herself is the chairperson of the Draupadi Dream Trust since 2003. The trust is engaged with the rehabilitation of Kuldevi temple at Côme, the Karam Bhumi of Draupadi. She is a research scholar in her own right and with wide interests. And one of the aims of her activity has been to highlight the neglect of Indraprastha in historical writings. And she feels that the situation must be corrected by raising awareness, by organizing discussions like this one. Indraprastha, established by the Pandavas, should be recognized as the first city of in the long series of Delhis that we have had. And raising awareness about this first city is the aim of today's panel discussion. Indraprastha has been documented in ancient texts. There is a lot of evidence that Indraprastha was a very old city. And it's also been documented in subsequent texts, in the texts by that name, in the texts produced in the Sultanate period, the Mughal period, the British period. And of course, as I said, the name has its origins and roots in the Mahabharata itself, as well as in the Tantric works, in the Jain works, in the Buddhist works. So it's a very well established name, and yet we know so little about this, and we find hardly any recognition of Indraprastha in any of our signages, etc. And there is, of course, some evidence also of the historicity of this city, ancient historicity of the city. The Archaeological Survey of India has done excavations in this area and in the Indraprastha area. And I think we will talk about these things a little bit later during the discussion. But the story of Purana Killa, which all you have seen all, is really fascinating, and it is situated where Indraprastha was probably once upon a time, and it's the Purana Killa is also known in the popular parlance as Pandava Killa. So there is some link in this area, this Purana Killa and or the Indraprastha Killa as well. And from what I learned from the documents that I saw, that Humayun sought to build a citadel in this ancient area of Indraprastha mound and named it as Deenpana. And he could not complete it. And later Sher Shah Suri destroyed Deenpana and constructed Shergarh, which I think is the existing structure. Dr. B.M. Pande is here, is the former director of the Archaeological Survey of India, a noted archaeologist, has done many excavations, and he has also been associated with the excavations at the Purana Killa site in Delhi, and he has also wide knowledge about not only this region but also surrounding states. He has been associated with excavations in Kalibangan in Rajasthan and in J&K, and also directed excavations at Thanesar in Haryana. He has also been associated with conservation work on monuments and sites in different states like Rajasthan, Gujarat, J&K, Punjab, Haryana, and Himachal Pradesh, etc. Mr. Côme Carpentier is known for his work on ancient India. Welcome to him. He has written on Mahabharata and also on Indraprastha. He is the convener of the International Board of World Affairs Journal. Born in Spain, he has lived in many countries. His work involves research in the areas of comparative sociology and philosophy, science and religion, international relations, geopolitics, but with a focus on economic and cultural cooperation for development. He is also associated with the World Public Forum Dialogue of Civilizations. Now, I think this panel will discuss in detail about Indraprastha and try and raise our awareness about this. But more important, what is it that we should do? I mean, one may ask the question, why have we neglected Indraprastha in the first place, when there has been excavations there and there has been enough evidence and at least to carry out more research. And maybe we will ask Dr. Pande about the government's policies, at least during his times, and also the Archaeological Survey of India, how they looked at this, and what is the current status. I think we have the former secretary also here, Culture.
Yeah, she's from, city.
You were from the UP government, okay. But anyway, so we have some experts here, and we would like to know why this neglect, if there was a neglect. Okay, let me put it this way, so let me not prejudge the issue. So we'll have so welcome to all, and let's now begin our discussions. Let me see what is the, so I'll request my panelists to make their initial remarks, perhaps in about, we have provided about 15 minutes, right? About 15 minutes, if you could kindly make your remarks. And then we'll like to have some interactive session and try and finish the discussion by 7 o'clock. So first I'll request Dr. Brij Mohan Pande to kindly make his remarks. Yeah, sure, please.
Good evening. Now my presentation today will be in 3 parts. I would like to read out first an excerpt from Sir Syed Ahmad Khan's work entitled Asarus Sanadid, published originally in the year 1847. This will be followed by a note on Indraprastha in Sanskrit inscriptions, in which I will also be giving a brief idea about the reference to Indraprastha in the writings of field workers and other scholars. This would perhaps be helpful in bringing out the role and importance of toponymy or onomastic studies. Finally, I would like to present summary of results from the Purana Kila excavations carried out between 1968-69 and 1971-72 by the Archaeological Survey of India. So I'll first read out what Sir Syed Ahmad Khan wrote in his Asarus Sanadid in 1847. This is originally in Urdu. I'll read it out now. पहले इंद्रप्रस्थ उस मैदान का नाम था जो पुराना किला और दरीबे के खूनी दरवाजे के दरमियान में है। हिंदुओं के इत्तेकाद में इंद्र नाम है एकास का राजा का, जो हिंदुओं के मज़हब में एक मुकर्ररी राजा है, और परस्त कहते हैं दोनों हाथों के मिले हुए लबों को। हिंदुओं के इत्तेकाद में ये बात है कि यहाँ राजा इंद्र ने किसी फर्जी ज़माने में दोनों हाथ भरकर मोतियों का दान किया था। इस सबब से इस जगह को इंद्रप्रस्थ कहते हैं। कसरत इस्तेमाल से रे और सीन हज़फ हो गया और इंद्रपथ मशहूर हो गया, मगर मेरी समझ में ये मानी तो ऐसे ही हैं जैसे और हिंदुओं की कहानियाँ। सही बात ये मालूम है कि पथ के मायने साहब और मालिक और हाकिम के हैं। जब ये शहर आबाद हुआ तो आबाद करने वाले ने नेक फाल समझकर, फाल का मतलब है ओमेन, नेक फाल समझकर इंद्रपथ नाम रखा, यानी शहर का मालिक या हाकिम इंद्र है, जो इकास और बहिश्त का राजा है। पहले ज़माने में यहाँ के राजाओं की तख्तगाह हस्तिनापुर था, जो गंगा के किनारे दिल्ली से तखमीनन 100 मील दूर है। जब राजा युधिष्ठिर और राजा दुर्योधन में बिगाड़ हुआ तो राजा युधिष्ठिर ने यहाँ यह शहर आबाद किया। हिंदी हिसाब बमौजिब यह झगड़ा द्वापर युग के आखिर और कलयुग की इब्तदा यानी 3121 साल कब्ल विलाजत हज़रत मसीह हुआ, दैट इज़ BC, बिफोर क्राइस्ट। मगर यह ज़माना सही नहीं मालूम होता क्योंकि ये मुद्दत तूफ़ान से भी पहले किया। दिस अबाउट द ग्रेट फ्लड। सही हिसाब से यूँ तहकीक हुआ है कि वाक़या महाभारत और राजा युधिष्ठिर की मसनद नशीनी 1450 साल तखमीनन हज़रत मसीह हुई, दैट इज़ 1430 BC। बस इस शहर के आबाद होने का यही सही ज़माना है। अगरचे अब इस शहर का निशान नहीं रहा, लेकिन शहर शाहजहानाबाद के जुनूब की तरफ दिल्ली दरवाज़े के बाहर जो ज़मीन है इंद्रपथ की ज़मीन कहलाती है। मगर ख़ास इंद्रपथ की आबादी अब नहीं रही। सारी ज़मीन में ज़राअत दैट इज़ फार्मिंग होती है और वहाँ के ज़मींदार पुराने किले में बसते हैं, और यह सबसे पहला शहर है जो यहाँ आबाद हुआ। इसके बाद फिर और आबादियाँ इसके आसपास होती रहीं। दिस इज़ व्हाट सर सैयद अहमद wrote in his Asar Shamir. I have deliberately brought this to your notice about the importance of the toponymy in our archaeological studies. Then I go to the next part of my presentation. It's about Indraprastha in inscriptions. And I'll also give a brief background about the earlier work done by the scholars from time to time. Now, Alexander Cunningham, in his report for the years 1862-63, referred to, and I quote, Indraprastha, the city of Yudhishthir, built along the bank of the river Jamuna between the Kotla of Firoz Shah and the tomb of Humayun. The name of Indraprastha is still preserved in that of Indrapath, a small fort which is also known by the name of Purana Kila or the Old Fort. The common people invariably call it either Indrapath or Purana Kila. He further stated that he did not believe that there now exists even a single carved stone of the city of Yudhishthir. The only spot that has any claim to have belonged to the ancient city is a place of pilgrimage on the Jamuna called Nigambodh Ghat. This ghat is celebrated as the place where Yudhishthir, after his performance of the Ashwamedh or horse sacrifice, celebrated the home. Unquote. Now in the same report, Cunningham writes, and I quote him again, a still earlier mention of Delhi may possibly be found in Ptolemy's Daidala, which is placed close to Indabara, perhaps Indrapath, and midway between Madura or Mathura and Batan Kaisan, that is Thaneshwar. The close proximity of Daidala to Indabara, joined in the curious resemblance of their names to Delhi and Indrapath, seems to me to offer very fair grounds for assuming their probable identity with these two famous Indian cities. Later, in 1920s, Maulvi Zafar Hasan, while describing the Purana Kila, also referred to the tradition according to which, quote, the fort of Purana Kila or Indrapath is generally believed to represent the site of the ancient city of Indraprastha, the name of the famous city of Yudhishthir. It is interesting to mention here that P.V. Kane, Mahamopadhyaya P.V. Kane, in his History of Dharma Shastra, has included a chapter on the list of tirthas in which Indraprastha, that is the modern village of Indrapath in Delhi, on the Yamuna, is mentioned as a tirth. Apart from the reference in the Adi, Vaman, and Mats Puran and the Vishnu Puran, Kane also refers to the Pratima Purana, Padma Puran, and the Bhagavat Puran, where it is said to have extended up to 4 yojanas to the south of Yamuna, and that was in Khandava Prastha. In his work on Muhammad bin Tughlaq, Agha Mehdi Hassan writes, Muhammad bin Tughlaq had inherited the old historical city of Delhi, divided into 3 small cities, namely Indraprastha, the original city, which had been conquered by the Turks in 1191, Siri, founded by Alauddin Khalji, and Tughlaqabad, built by Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Each city was protected by a rampart and a stronghold. It is thus evident from the references which I mentioned about that there existed and survived the tradition about Indraprastha, which more or less was identified with the site where the 16th century citadel of Purana Kila came to be built. It is, however, surprising that apart from the tradition or references in the text, there are only scanty examples of inscriptions wherein Indraprastha is mentioned. Of the few examples, the earliest are the Chandramathi Plates of the Gahadwala ruler Chandradev, who ruled between 1089 and 1103. And these plates give the dates Vikram Samvat 1148, 1150 and 1156, corresponding respectively to 1090-91, 1092-93 and 1098-99 CE, Common Era. The plates of Vikram Samvat 1148 mention Indra Sthaniyak, which is identifiable with Indraprastha. I will not read the original text. But it says that this ruler, reaching the holy places situated in Kashi, Kashik and Uttar Koshal and Indraprastha, gave to Brahmanas every day gold equal in weight to his person. The other reference to Indraprastha is available in the Machli Shahar copper plate inscription found in Kotwa village in the Tehsil Machli Shahar district, Jaunpur, Uttar Pradesh. The inscription is in Sanskrit, written in Nagari characters, and carries the date Sunday, the 15th Tithi of the bright half of the month of Pausha in the Vikram Samvat 1253, corresponding to Sunday 6 January 1197. The inscription records the grant made by the Gahadwala ruler Harish Chandra Dev, and like the previous ones mentions Indrasthaniyak, which can be identified with Indraprastha. Then this reference to Indraprastha is as a holy place also supports the evidence cited by P.V. Gane, which I mentioned earlier, as mentioned in his list of Tirthas. It is quite obvious that Indraprastha continued to be considered as a Tirth during the period of rule of the Gahadwala rulers. Now, while these inscriptions refer to Indraprastha as Indrasthaniyak, the two inscriptions which are datable to early 14th century during the time of the Sultan Muhammad Tughlaq, who is mentioned as Mahmud Shahi in these inscriptions, clearly mention Indraprastha. Both the inscriptions are on stone and record the construction of a well, step well. Of the two, the earlier one is the Narayana stone inscription, where Narayana is mentioned as Nadayana, which gives the date somewhat 1384, both in words and minerals, corresponding to Tuesday, the 6th of August, 1327. As already mentioned, the inscription is in Sanskrit, written in Nagari. It records the construction of a well to the north of the village called Narayana, which is now modern Narayana village. The well was dug to perpetuate the memory of the ancestors of one Sridhar, who had established themselves at Narayana. The family of merchants are mentioned as belonging to the Rohitak family. I'll not go into the details of the original text, but it says that there is a great and virtuous province named Haryana. Therein lies this town of Dilli. There was formerly a merchant named Govinda Dev who made his abode in the Nadayana village. He was the glory of the Rohitak family and was accomplished in various pious deeds. In that western direction of Indraprastha, there is a village called Nadayana, and in the north of this village, Sridhar had a well dug for the perpetuation of his ancestors, for the propitiation of his ancestors. Now, this inscription is quite important on several counts. It mentions Delhi as Dillipuri, which is located in Haryana. The Narayana village where the well was dug can be identified, as I mentioned, with the modern Narayana, the history of which can be dated back to the 14th century on the basis of this inscription, if not earlier. The other inscription which clearly mentions Indraprastha is the Sarban stone inscription. It contains 17 lines in Sanskrit written in Nagari characters and carries the date both in words and numerals, which corresponds to 16th February 1328. The inscription gives the history of the city, that is Dillipuri, which according to the inscription was founded by the Tomars, who were followed by the Chahamans or the Chauhans. The Chauhans were defeated by the Malech Sahabuddin, that is Shahabuddin Muhammad of War. Then the ruler at the time when the inscription was put up was Turushk Shri Mahmud Shahi, that is Muhammad Tughlaq. The inscriptions also records the construction of a well in the village of Saravela, which, according to scholar, is obviously an earlier form of the village Sarvan. The well was caused to be made by two brothers, Khetala and Paitala. Their name is mentioned, in memory of their ancestors and their attaining the heaven, as well as for the perpetuation of their race. Khetala and Paitala belong to the family of merchants hailing originally from Agrotak, which is identified with Agroha. Now, unfortunately, it has not been possible to refer to inscriptions in Persian mentioning Indraprastha. However, there are references to Indraprastha in other historical works in Persian and other languages. For instance, in some Persian texts of the 14th century, it is stated that Indraprastha or Indapat was the headquarters of a Pargana, which in Sarban inscription is mentioned as a Pratigana. For instance, it finds mention in the Tarikh-e Firoz Shahi of Ziauddin Barni and Shamsus Siraj. Further, the 13th century work of Sadruddin Hasan Nizami, Tajul Ma'asir, which describes events of the period between 1192 and 1228, mentioned that there was a village, Moza, of the name of Indraprastha near Delhi. This is what the reference is available about Indraprastha in inscriptions. Finally, I will say something about the results of our excavations at Purana Kila, which were conducted between 1968 and 1972 for 4 seasons. I was a member of the team which carried out the excavations then. Let's have some water. Well, as it is well known, Purana Kila has been ascribed to variously to Humayun and Sher Shah, and the site is generally identified as mentioned by Dr. Gupta with Indraprastha. In fact, when we were young, we used to say that this is the Indraprastha. This was embedded in our memory, the headquarters of the Pandavas. This site was explored by several scholars, starting with Alexander Cunningham and later on by others. In 1913-14, an inscription of Bhoja of the Pratihara dynasty, who ruled between 836 and 85, was found in Purana Kila. In 1954-55, some trial excavations were carried out by B.B. Lal, who later on took up the detailed excavation work along with B.K. Thapar and M.C. Joshi, during the course of which sherds of what we call in our archaeology as painted graveware and northern black polished ware were found, besides remains of Shunga and Kushana periods. Then later on, when the detailed excavations were carried out at Purana Kila, remains of 8 cultural periods were found. However, and this is very significant, neither painted graveware nor anything associated with it was found. Well, as some of you may be already aware, that painted graveware on the basis of its distribution in an area which is associated with which is the locale of the Mahabharata story, has been on circumstantial ground suggested to belong to the period of the Mahabharata. However, this association is yet to be corroborated by either epigraphic or ethnographic evidence. I'll now give you briefly the various remains of various periods, cultural periods, which have been exposed from these detailed excavations. Now, period 1 was the earliest, that which is Maurya, is represented by mud floors, houses of mud brick, and wattle and daub structures, drains of baked brick, both rectangular and wedge-shaped, and the wedge-shaped bricks were perhaps intended to be used originally for the construction of well or some other circular structure. Another important feature of the period is the occurrence of terracotta ring wells. You know, the wells which are dug and they are encased within by these rings made of terracotta. This is a very early evidence. Terracotta ring wells, which are about 75 centimeter in diameter, and a series of hearths. The other finds of this period included fragment of a sculptured ring stone, which is very typical of the Mauryan period. In fact, the objects which were recovered from the excavations at Purana Kila are also displayed in Purana Kila itself in an exhibition. And then a very interesting, some interesting terracotta human and animal figurines, including a horse rider wearing armor, a terracotta seal reading Seyan Karasa, and another reading Swati Rakhithasa, and a dish of northern black polished ware, which is very typical of the Mauryan period, showing a stamped figure of an elephant, then rings and discs of banded agate, uninscribed cast coin, so on and so forth. structures of period 2, which is Shunga, 2nd century BC, show 3 phases, of which the first 2 are characterized by the use of Delhi quartzite in mud mortar, and the last one of mud brick. Now, when the significance of Mauryan period remains is further attested to by the discovery of an Ashokan rock addict, which is located in what is now called as the east of Kailash. Now, the very fact that there was an Ashokan rock, Ashok had an inscription edict engraved there itself is important, because the other 2 Ashokan inscriptions are not in situ. They were brought from Ambala and Berat respectively by Firoz Shah Tughlaq, whereas this particular rock edict is in situ, which further attests to the importance of Purana Kila, or Indraprastha as it was known at that time, because there must have been a very flourishing establishment which is quite obvious by the remains which have been discovered during the excavations at Purana Kila. Now, the second period was of the Shunga period, and there were some very interesting plaques made of terracotta representing several types. And then in the period 3, which is Shaka Kushan, that is first, second century before the before Common Era, is represented by the remains of regularly built houses of baked brick. Sometimes mud brick was also used. And then important antiquities which have been found include votive tanks, terracotta figurines showing foreign and local influence and prepared out of single or double molds, copper coins of the Kushan and Yodhayas, and a small ivory handle. Then the next period is Gupta, which is marked by houses made of reused bricks of the previous period. And among the structures was a very impressive house having 3 to 4 constructional phases. Then the important finds of this period consist of some terracotta human figurines, terracotta seals and ceilings, a damaged Mukhalinga in Mathura sandstone, and a few seals and ceilings besides molded pottery. Then the next period was period 5 is post-Gupta. The structural remains show the use of mud brick and reuse of earlier baked bricks. Interestingly enough is the presence of various types of ovens, some of them resembling modern tandoors. The next one is the Rajput period, represented by a few structures, again where bricks have been reused of the earlier period. There were very interesting material which was found along beside these structures, which include copper coins of bull and horseman type, terracotta figurines in folk style, beads, a sherd with Nagari inscription, and a lipped jug containing bells, trinkets and other objects of copper, and a small figure of Vishnu. The Sultanate period, the next is the Sultanate period, which is noteworthy for the medieval presence of medieval glazed ware and Sultanate coins. Finally, we have the last period, the Mughal, where the remains of a stone-flagged court and an adjoining large brick structure with a 1.2 meter thick wall and houses with lime plastered floors and sunken basins were noteworthy, besides a hammam complex consisting of side rooms, underground chamber with marks of burning and semicircular projection. In the construction of this building, this hammam complex, Lakhori bricks and rubble were used. Among the different kind of objects which were found, I would like to mention the Chinese porcelain of the Ming period. One of the Chinese porcelain piece carried an inscription which said, which mentioned Thaming Cheng Hun Chuaning, that is of the time of Huaninchi, the Ming emperor. Then celadon ware and paper thin deluxe grey ware, which is very typical of the Mughal period, pieces of glass bottles. Here I would like to add that the excavations were carried out in the southeastern area of the mound, and the natural soil was perhaps not reached. In my view, excavating or probing somewhere in the central portions of the mound may perhaps yield information about the earliest levels, which, if I may hypothesize, provide some tangible clues about the antiquity of the site and affirmation of the tradition about its identification with Indraprastha of the Mahabharata. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you heard from someone who has actually done those excavations, and whatever his presentation clearly shows the great continuity in that area. I mean, it was constantly inhabited, and so many things have been discovered there. And there's no reason why I think more will not be discovered if we make an effort. Now, let me request Professor Côme Carpentier to kindly make his presentation.
Dr. Arvind Gupta, Dr. Pande, Mrs. Neera Mishra, ladies and gentlemen, friends. It's an honor to be back at the Vivekananda Foundation, where I have attended several Vimarshas before and even participated in a seminar some years ago on a very different topic. I am going to try to give in a very few words an outline of what we should remember about the role that Indraprastha has played in India and in the wider world. Of course, the initial remarks have to do with a mixture of history and legend, or call it mythology. But mythology, I do not mean something unreal or untrue. I mean something which has acquired mythical status because of its antiquity and the fact that poets have magnified it, have embellished it, and at the same time we lack some of the modern required evidential proof to make it part of history per se. If you start with Mahabharata, you know that Yudhishthira and his brothers, having in the middle of their conflict with, or at least their argument with the Kauravas, were given or asked to be given 5 pieces of land, and one for each of them, which essentially would settle the dispute and enable them to live contented with their own estates. Now, right from the beginning, you know that the word prastha is a very old word which you find in all Indo-European languages. In Greek, it's plateia, and it essentially means a flat, generally elevated plain, which can be circumvallated, which means it can be surrounded with walls and a moat, and it becomes the place where a king can hold court, can hold a market for the sake of the people who are with him, and can deliver justice and protect his subjects. So this was the original function of Indraprastha, which was, as you all know, originally called Khandavaprastha, and it was part of what was Kuru Jangala in the south of Kurukshetra, which has, of course, a much, much older history than the Mahabharata, because it finds place in the oldest parts of Indian, I'd say, religious and spiritual traditions, in the Vedic lore. It is also known as Ilaspada. It is a place where it's Brahmavarta, it's Brahmayoni. So it is a place where the world is supposed to have come into being, and where Manu Vaivashvarata ruled, and his daughter Ila gave rise to the first dynasty, the Aila dynasty. And then you find traces of, or rather records of great disputes and great conflicts between rival races which may have been from the same origin but which were competing for power, such as the Daityas and the Adityas, the Devas and the Asuras. And later on, of course, you have the famous conflict between the Kurus and the Pandavas. And interestingly, all of those lines are connected. Even when you talk about the Nagas, who were earlier inhabitants of the area, you find that the Pandavas had some Naga connections as well in their families. So they are not necessarily strange nations. They are essentially rival siblings. And as you know, there is no rivalry like inter-family rivalry or intra-family rivalry. So when you look at the beginning of Indraprastha, you see that essentially it was Indra's territory, and Indra was the god of wilderness, of untamed nature. And, you know, the Maya, that Asura was essentially in that jungle, Kuru Jangala, because most probably the heart, in fact, very probably the heart of the Kuru land was on the east of Yamuna, and Delhi is on the west. And therefore, the old capital Hastinapura, which was on the Ganga side, shows that actually the Kurus were settled more to the east. And when Arjuna essentially fought Maya and forced him to surrender, but spared his life, Maya offered to build the most beautiful sabha and the most beautiful city, although there are some interpretations that say there was already something there. But whether or not it was the first construction in an area that was wild before, the fact is that it became a great seat of power, as shown by the later you know, parts of the epic, in which you see the 5 Pandava brothers settling there, and each one of the 4 younger brothers going in one direction, north, east, south, and west, in, of course, what was called the Digvijaya, in order to conquer territory, going very far, practically encompassing not only the whole of Jambudvipa or the whole of India at that time, but as far as Arjuna is concerned, going all the way to Harivarsha, which is probably, from what it says about it, southern Siberia and Mongolia. And interestingly enough, you do find cultural and historical memories of contacts with India that go back very, very far, both in Mongolia and in southern Siberia, in terms of linguistics, in terms of culture, and you do even find the pathways, the routes that were followed, probably in both directions. But the fact that there could have been conquering expeditions from northern India into that region, going all the way into what is now Xinjiang, Turkestan, and further north, is in fact attested by a number of records. Now here, as we know, history cannot be a safe guide if you are looking at history from the point of view of chronology, because the chronology is, of course, hopelessly controversial. And I don't want to dwell on that, because it would take a long time. And there are many people far more qualified than I am who have been discussing it and not agreeing on when things happen. And many people will tell you, you see, the Mahabharata has been undergoing so many aggregations and additions over the centuries that you cannot know what is from the original Jaya and what came later, and therefore there are obviously episodes which are diachronic or even anachronic, and therefore how can you retrace the physical geography and the human geography of that period by going along the text that we have now. However, what's interesting is that the history of Indraprastha is reflected indirectly in other cultures, because every time you refer to Kurukshetra, to the heart of Kuru power, you find echoes of that in Persia, in the Middle East, and you find a lot of place names and people's names that show you the connection that existed between what was then northwestern India in particular, and the Middle East, all the way to the Mediterranean and to Egypt. I won't go into that because it would take us too long to cite some of these analogies. Let me just mention the Assyrians, Asuras, and the Syrians, Suras, as an example. And then if you come much closer to us, you see that the Baloch, for example, in Balochistan claim to have come from Syria. And on the other hand, if you talk to the descendants of the Bhattis, who ruled in Jaisalmer, among other places, they tell you that they led expeditions as far as Syria in antiquity. So inevitably, you see a sort of going and coming of civilizations, not only invaders, but also merchants and sages, scholars, going back and forth, just as they went into Central Asia, as they went into China, as they went into all the way as far as Europe, and of course Southeast Asia. And here you can see the strategic position of Delhi, which as a mound between the Brij and the Yamuna was an easily fortified stronghold that could hold invaders. And most invaders, as we know from recent history, from more recent history, came through what is called the Karnal Breach. And the great battles took place somewhere between Karnal and Panipat, and it goes all the way into practically the 19th century. You always had these conflicts there. So the threat was perennially from the northwest, and nothing has changed. Whereas the expansion, culturally and commercially, took place both along the rivers towards the southwest, that is, of course, Yamuna, and southeast Yamuna and southwest Saraswati at the time, and towards the south, and towards the east, reaching all the way to Mithila and Banga, I mean all the areas that are now Bihar and Orissa and Bengal. So you can see that the mission of any city located in this area was also to protect the country from the northwestern invaders, who at that time were often referred to as Gandharvas or Gandharas and Kaikeyas, and there were many others. And of course, later we had the Shakas, and then we had the Kushans, we had the Hunas, and we had several civilizations or peoples that were not unrelated to the inhabitants of this part of India, because what's very interesting in the Mahabharata is to note the correspondences that are established between certain peoples settled in India and considered to be native inhabitants, like the Kurus and the Uttara Kurus, and a number of other people who are mentioned, especially in the Balarama, in the pilgrimage of Balarama along the Saraswati. You do find a number of tribes mentioned, who are also then said to have lived in the reaches of the northern Himalayas and in what is today Afghanistan and Turkestan. So did they expand to those areas, or did they come into India from those areas? Well, the official historiography, mostly written originally by Western historians, would of course say that these were all invaders who came into India. But there is quite a strong case to be made for the opposite view, that at least some of them moved out of India and went west and north. And the so-called Bactria-Margiana archaeological area is regarded as a possible stopover on the way to the far west, for what was at that time the far west, that is the Caspian area and beyond Europe. So the fact that there were very strong commercial links, I mean, this was the so-called Shaka route, and then the Parthian route, because the Parthians, Partha, they are very much part of the Indo-European heritage. They provided this sort of highway. They not only guarded the highway, but they also carried goods along the highway in both directions. So that essentially tells us that Indraprastha was a major civilizational center, which was remembered by the first Zoroastrian Persians. Sorry, I meant pre-Zoroastrian, because Zoroaster represents a relatively late reform. But when they talked about their origin being Varena, that is most likely, and there is one of the members of the project conducted by Mrs. Neera Mishra, Mr. Jain Ravi, who has done very good work, very serious work, showing that the Varena of the Persians, which was in their cosmology, the center of the world, was in fact this area which is called Kurukshetra, Ilaspada, which is very closely related to the Himalayas. And that is, of course, where you have to remember what Maya did when he wanted to build Indraprastha. He went to the Himalayas, he went to the place where King Vrishaparva had left treasures under the Bindu Lake, near the Mainaka mountain, probably Kailasha, and he took back a number of treasures to Indraprastha in order to hide them beneath the Sabha as foundational gems, Vandas, which would be essentially a sign of the great sacredness of the place. So you have that Himalayan cosmological symbolism which is embedded in Indraprastha. And likewise, you are told that great Rishi Dadich, who had gifted his bones to Indra to make the Vajra, he is buried here, and his son was, of course, Saraswata, who brought the Vedas back together after the great disaster which had destroyed most of the previous civilization. So that puts Indraprastha, as well as Hastinapura, of course, but then Hastinapura eventually disappeared because of the floods. And Hastinapura, in a way, was also cursed because of its association with the Kauravas, even though the Pandavas went back to rule there after they had defeated them. But still, Indraprastha remains the imperial capital, which India never forgot. And the Buddhists also claimed it. The Buddhist Jatakas, some of the Buddhist scriptures, say that in Indraprastha there are relics of the Buddha. So it was a tirtha. It was, in fact, a major tirtha, as well as one of the Mahajanapadas. And it kept this special status for quite a few thousand years. And the decline probably began with the great invasions, including the Shakas, who were defeated by Vikramaditya. And of course, the fact that the power had shifted east with the Mauryas, so that Delhi, like Taxila and other places on the northwest, were more like frontier towns or garrison towns to keep the enemies at bay. So I will end by saying that in terms of geopolitics, where things often remain the same, there is still the challenge that India has to protect its northwest, all the way from Kashmir, which is probably the former Aryan Vaijo of the Persians, to Gujarat. And Indraprastha plays, of course, that protective role, but it is also a cultural and a sacred capital whose heritage should be preserved and should be highlighted. And we see now a real effort to be made to revive and to embellish and improve many of the facilities and many of the sites of Delhi. And if I refer to the recent meeting between the Chinese and the Indian heads of state in Mamallapuram, one, of course, is immediately reminded that Mamallapuram is almost entirely dedicated to Mahabharata, which shows the universality of the epic. The fact that it's not a North Indian story, but it is an all India encompassing mythological, cultural, civilizational, and historical encyclopedia. Thank you.
So, thank you very much for that fascinating account of the ancient geopolitics, as it were. It's really fascinating to hear that expeditions from here may have gone out, and the echoes are found in Siberia and in Mongolia, and even perhaps from the west and Syria, etc. I think today there is a lot of debate going on, and this Aryan invasion theory is almost as good as junked. Many people are arguing against it. And also these latest finds in this Rakhi Gadi, where the DNA has been of some Harappa skeletons. Harappa skeletons find that these DNAs have no reflection of Central Asian or beyond. It's very purely the local DNA. And then how come then the similarities, etc., that you mentioned? So it's quite possible what you're saying is that expeditions may have gone. And also the geopolitical importance of this region. I mean, Indraprastha, of course, is the anchor, but Kurukshetra, Hastinapur, Yamuna, the Brij, the Himalayas, the rivers, the Saraswati, I think it's all coming together now. And there is a need for a constructing, need to do more research to see what really ancient India was. Because none of what you said is really part of our normal history teaching. Even as a question mark, they do not ask this. This is totally neglected. I think efforts like yours and others is very important. So thank you very much for giving us that fascinating account of Indraprastha and placing it in this larger geopolitical context. Now I request Madam Neera Mishra to kindly make her presentation.
Namaskar, good evening to everybody. I thank Director Dr. Arvind Gupta ji and his wonderful team at Vivekananda Foundation for taking up this significant topic for discussion. Thank you also for the opportunity opportunity given to us to share our humble work in this program. The evening is very nostalgic also, like a homecoming to me, because I had started my journey with Vivekananda in 2010 with a lot of international conferences like Deep Roots of Indian Civilization, the Mahabharata, and programs like Kavita Ki Sham, Desh Ke Naam. So thank you, Dr. Gupta, for reviving this interesting journey. The evening's topic is intrinsically linked to the deep roots of our country and, of course, is Desh Ke Naam. Indraprastha, a capital journey. I would like to take you through a very different, unusual journey of Indraprastha, the land of Pandavas and Draupadi, which has withstood so many challenges, as Dr. Gupta just mentioned. A nation's identity is reflected through its cultural and historical journey and related landscape. Culture is the soul of any country, and history provides us the antiquity, the deep roots that become the identity, giving it a political strength. To know one's country, one has to know all these aspects and know them factually, with correct perspectives. In this context, how does Indraprastha, which is now normally called Delhi, fare, the capital of Bharatvansh? How many here or how many Indians know the real history, the ancient geography or cultural journey of our capital city as it really happened? The question is pertinent. A cursory glance around this city gives the impression that it is merely a few 100-year-old city. What is the reason for this perception versus reality, or subjectivity overcoming facts? Playing with spatial cultural dimensions changes one's other aspects, understanding of other aspects. Most affected is the individual's understanding of historical cultural truths. Some damages have, of course, happened due to natural causes, disasters, but more disturbing are the ones that are man-made. The story of events related to the remaking of Somnath Mandir, I think, is pretty well known to everybody. I would like to take this conversation or this journey through three simple aspects: some less known and unknown facts, some fallacious history, and finally, there has to be a way forward because we cannot live with unreality for too long. Could you show me the first slide, please? Yeah. It is quite explicit here, 90 years of British rule, 1857 to 1947, approximately 650 years of Muslim rule, approximately 1192 to 1857, and prior to that, the orange line tells us almost more than 4,000 years of indigenous rule. Now, this is so clear that it's very difficult to even accept that this discrepancy for our nation's capital is happening. The dates that I have mentioned, approximate dates, are from astronomical dating of Professor Narhari Hachar, who is a USA based from Memphis University. He has presented 2-3 papers at our conference on dating of Mahabharata war, that is, I wouldn't say, sorry, the Kurukshetra war. And the archaeological datings, do normally people are talking about 1400, etc., because the dating of PGW has been done almost 20-30 years ago. That dating has been quoted, that is in reference to Cunningham and even Professor Lal. But latest findings in many places, especially Mathura and north part of India, PGW dating has gone back to almost 2400 BC. Okay, so now the next image, can you show me that village, please? This is an old picture of Purana Killa. Next, please. These are old Purana Killa. Next, please. Next, please. Piche jao beta. Ye. Now, this picture shows the revenue district of Indraprastha, which has also had a land settlement record, which is given later. If you can just script through that, you will see the land settlement records also, please. Niche jao. This previous wala, this is the revenue map of Indraprastha Mauza as per 1877, and after that is the land records. In 1913 and 14, the concrete habitation of Indraprastha, this picture of Indraprastha is 1903, taken by the colonial rulers. But in 1913 and 14, the concrete habitation of Indraprastha was demolished, but as per my understanding, they were sensitive enough not to destroy the 2 important public buildings, which is one is the Kunti Mandir and the other was the Indraprastha Old School. How many of you knew that there was an old school named Indraprastha within Purana Killa and there is a Kunti Mandir within Purana Killa? Hardly anybody knows that. How many of you would know that? That there was a school. This school has been shifted in the 1950s, late 50s. ASI removed these people, and the old Indraprastha school is now on Pandara Road. Incidentally, Pandara Road was actually to be Pandav Road, and they say it was a clerical error. We could not understand the difference between V and R. And they have painted the Purana picture outside their school. Okay, and the Kunti, of course, Mandin. There are some other images of ancient places of our capital. Can you just skip through those places? Connected to Mahabharata, of course, we only have the Gambodh Bad, the Neeli Chhatri, which was renovated during the Rajput period. And this side, Mehroli side, we have the Yog Maya Mandir. Can you just show those images, please? Yog Maya. This is, of course, the inscription mentioned by Professor Dr. Tig. Aage chalo, ye Narayana. Ha, aur aage, ha. This is Rai Pithor, Prithviraj Chauhan, and this is the iron pillar of the Pala, that page of the Anangpal people. So the ancient places related to Delhi are so limited, but in spite of being limited, they should be highlighted. They're never highlighted. Recently, there was an illumination program at Qutub Minar, and rather than highlighting the iron pillar, which is the oldest, the Minar was highlighted. Now, I'm sorry to say, but Archaeological Survey of India is meant to actually go into the deep roots of Indian or any other civilization and showcase that. Why this discrepancy is a question that we all need to ponder. It is a fact of history that Indraprastha was the result of a political decision of the Kuru kingdom. Now, why we have this discrepancy, as Dr. Arvind asked me, we have to understand a few facts which have been so wrongly presented over a period of time. Number one, we know the Mahabharata normally taught as a book of religion or as a book of high philosophy, maybe also a book of good literature. What Sundar Sanskrit Mahakavya? How many of the people have actually seen it as a book of our Itihasa? When the book right in the beginning says that this is the Itihasa. This book or Mahabharata or Ramayana or the Puranas are actually our itihasa. And they tell us the sacred geography and history of an era gone by. They list kings, they list events. It is for us to understand. Now, why this has happened is because the methodology of writing history of ancient India was different from the methodology that was imposed on us by the colonial rulers. So if we are going to judge everything by the parameters set by the colonial rulers, everything is a myth, everything is a figment of imagination. So this is one of the reasons that we have failed to see the history of our own nation and credit it and remember it and showcase it. The historicity of Indraprastha is not only authenticated in the Mahabharata, it is also authenticated with the available details of the long lineage of indigenous rulers from Yudhishthir up to Chauhan, and of course after Chauhan we all know what happened after 1192. That history we don't have to go into, when the Prithviraj Chauhan was killed and brutally dishonored. Another thing we have to know, how many of you know that the last Hindu ruler who crowned himself king at Purana Killa was Hemuchand. He defeated the army of Akbar. Of course, later he was defeated by Akbar's general Bayram Khan and beheaded, etc. But that is a part of history. Anybody who takes charge in an office, even a DM's office, even if he takes charge for 1 year, 1 day, his name is there. So why not the names of all the kings who took charge at Purana Killa as king? Why not? Another thing that we need to know is Indraprastha over centuries got identified mainly with the Pandav Killa, because that was the seat of the capital of the headquarters of the rulers. But can you imagine that they got 5 prasthas which are spread across Sonipat, Panipat, Tilpat, Bagpat and Indrapat. So is Indraprastha only Purana Killa? Purana Killa is the site of the rulers. It was the place from where they ruled. It's like they were that Rashtrapati Bhavan. You cannot limit Delhi to Rashtrapati Bhavan. This is one mistake we make when we talk about that no PGW was found in Purana Killa excavations. There is a record of a lot of scholars, Frankensberg also mentions, huge basketfuls of PGW found near the designated Humayun's tomb, a place that is called Humayun's tomb. How far is Humayun's tomb from Purana Killa? And is that area not a part of Indraprastha? So how can you say that we did not find PGW at Purana Killa, so this is not related to Mahabharata? I think it's a very, very wrong understanding. The Purana Killa got the important association with the city-state. Now also city-state, Indraprastha was a city-state. So Indraprastha was the state of the Pandavas as well the city, the capital of the Pandavas. So like Delhi, it was a city-state, and it got associated because every ruler post the Pandavas eyed this place to conquer the most magnificent and well-planned city. Poor Pandav Killa was battered and conquered so many times that the later rulers, of course, had to build their own citadels. So we had the Lal Kot, we had the Rai Pithora. Everybody would come to Purana Killa and then they would find their own little citadel and they would create their own little citadel. There are records mentioning that when Khilji came, he actually took pieces from Purana Killa to make his citadel, and likewise they would do that, you know. The Khilji citadel came up, then the Tughlaqabad came up, then we had the Red Fort, then the Firoz Shah and everything. Now if you'll kindly note, all these were forts, they were cantonments made for ruling, protecting and safeguarding the interest of the ruler. Because they were always against odds, no matter उन्हीं का कोई आदमी आके उनको हराएगा, whether it is from India or from abroad, whatever, it's always happened. So this is a wrong nomenclature. We often hear that we are going for a city walk, Tughlakabad city walk. We are going for a Firoz Shah city walk. We are going for a Khilji city walk, Siri city walk. They are not cities. The only city that came up at Delhi was Indraprastha, a very well planned, meticulously planned. If you see, the Mahabharata period was the post-Vedic period. And they would follow the Vedic style of making cities. Now, the colonials who came probably could not visualize the extent that a city can have. So they started calling these little cantonments as cities. All these were forts and citadels and not imperial cities, which is wrong, which is a wrong nomenclature, incorrect promotion, which has been happening in Delhi. These were cantonments, as I just said. Also note, through every image of Purana Killa that you see in the newspaper, they write Deen Pana. But we are all aware that Humayun came, he ruled for some time, he started his Deen Pana creation for his religious people, but Sher Shah came and demolished everything. All records say, Muslim records say that. And he built his new Shergarh. Whatever is within Purana Killa of medieval period is from, the Shergarh period. So where is the question of calling it Deen Pana? I don't understand. So there is a design in what is happening. So I deliberately did not mention Deen Pana because as far as I know, either that place is Indraprastha because it is recorded at Indraprastha in all records. The 1911 notification of the British, sorry, 1911 notification records it as Mauza Indraprastha, Purana Killa. I'm so sorry. Ramji, mera. I got my. I would like to just clarify a few things with. So, why Indraprastha has been neglected is because there has been a deliberate designs from 1970. If you see the old, thanks so much. We all know that what happened in the 1970s when the national integration policy was created. We know about NCERT, we know about ICHR, we know about so many things. We also have to remember culture then was under education ministry and ASI was under education ministry. So when ASI entered there, obviously the changes that you see in Purana Killa or in other parts of the city have been made into a particular specific architecture. Why? When our nation represents multicultural ethos, when our nation has had a history of all types of people coming, different cultures coming here and ruling, why should we showcase only one culture in Delhi? This is the reason why Indraprastha has been neglected. One reason that nobody believes that Mahabharata is true. Secondly, they feel that only what is visible, big thing where it's become a big economic business. For thousands of years, we have been dominated, fine, but now that we are independent, I have come here 26 years ago. Every year, crores of rupees are going into these buildings. The renovation, I'm saying renovation, there's no preservation happening there. But when we want to create or we want to showcase Indraprastha, there is an objection. We cannot create, we can only preserve. As I said, the Somnath temple is an example. So Delhi needs to understand, the people of Delhi, that unless they nourish their roots, unless they ensure that the roots of their civilization is protected, the tree of the civilization will not remain protected. If you're just showing the trunk without nourishing roots, how long can you have those fruits above? So we have planned some sort of a way forward. And the most important thing to do would be now to create an Indraprastha development board. Just the way we did for Kurukshetra. What was there on Kurukshetra? It's a battlefield. A battlefield has been converted into a beautiful city of tourism. Delhi can be the most beautiful, most attractive center of tourism for showcasing India's heritage. What we had suggested, that there is a school building which should convert into an interpretation center. The cells should be sort of preserved and made into different states representing the culture of different states, and complete showcasing of ancient. So we have created certain perspectives of the Purana Killa and highlighted. I will just read through what we have planned. Beta dikhana wo wala. I'm sorry, but yesterday I had something very bad. This was, which one is this? This is, So we have suggested under the Indraprastha Development Board the identification and development of all places linked to different periods. We are not saying only Indraprastha, we are saying different periods of our nation. So every period is represented not only culturally, through cultural landscape also, not just in books. Second thing, in this we want to show that Panditji just told us about the different layers that have been exposed. So we said, why don't you expose this site, cover it under a prefabricated, environmentally controlled structure, and showcase the actual antiquity of Purana Killa. That will at once clear the perceptions that Purana Killa is only a medieval place. And within the Purana Killa, what is the harm of showcasing its original people's events, its original people's memorials? Why not? Through digital, through dioramas. So there are two aspects to this whole concept that we have thought of. That first of all, we have of course a road named Bhish Pitama. We do have I think a road named Purana Killa also. Why not other people of other ages? So I think what we need to do is, Indraprastha basically is the cradle of all civilizations, all rulers, all people who came into this place. So this cradle has to be nurtured and created in such a way that it encompasses in it all cultures, but mainly the original culture. Why not an image of Indra? Why not an image of Krishna? Of course, we all know that it was a result of a dharmic battle. It was the result of a fight for preserving dharma. So this is what our suggestion is. Dr. Gupta did say that why is it that we have been suffering this? Why is it Indraprastha is lost? Indraprastha is lost because no one has been told that Indraprastha is the reality. We have been told that yes, hota tha, ye sab mangaran baatein hain. Regarding Mahabharata, one issue was raised I'd like to clarify here. When I also say that Mahabharata is history, and people say that there are a lot of interpolations, as I said, the methodology of writing history in those days was different. Original Jaya definitely consisted of 8,800 verses, basically about the war. That is, it was only called Jaya because it was talking about the Vijay of Dharma over Adharma. And the second volume of 24,000 verses was called Bharata because it dealt mainly with the clan of Bharata, all the people related to Bharata. But gradually what happens, that as you come to gather more information, as things were subsiding, people were writing, see, the whole of the country was involved. It was not only this. From the records that we have, the king of Kashmir could not take part because he was a minor. But the king of Travancore said, I'm not going to send soldiers to fight, but I'm going to send food for both the armies. So there was involvement of every part of India. The final name of Mahabharata actually does not signify the war, it signifies the history of the greater Bharat. So when we loosely talk and say कि Mahabharat ho jayegi, I'm sorry, Mahabharat war was 18 days for Dharma, Ramayana was 40 days war. Why don't we say Ramayana ho jayegi? Isn't it? So we have to understand the nomenclatures correctly. Mahabharat means the story of the greater Bharat, which encompasses. Yes, other people were mentioned because there was another system in old days that they could add on to the same book. Instead of creating new different books every time, they could add on what was happening into the old book. And that is why we come to know about the Huns and other people that are mentioned, the foreigners are mentioned, because people continued updating that same book rather than having 10 different books. It became an easy manual to teach the people. But for some reason, it started being taught as religion in Western countries. And so it became taboo, it's religion, we should not touch it. And then it became, oh, it's war, it's war. War is also Ramayana. So I think we need to rethink and we need to work out on a plan which will help us to create Indraprastha as the model destination tourism. One more thing I'd like to say, I'm sorry I'm exceeding my time. When the Lutyens Delhi, the first city was Indraprastha, a huge city that was created. Second was a mini city called New Delhi. And I went through the records of the imperial city creation. There's also an interesting book by Mallavika Singh called The Making of New Delhi. They went to depths of knowing about Indraprastha. And they actually identified the areas. Because the Indraprastha was created after cleaning, after destroying forest, and it is mentioned they created gardens, they created flora, fauna, they actually replenished the whole land with with the ponds and everything. And you see Purana Kila ke bagal mein you see the zoo and a lot of flora and fauna. So they have planned it in such a way with their vision that this is the seat of the Pandavas, and around this there must be the protection of the flora and fauna. Our problem is this, that people from outside do appreciate and understand, but people within India are so much involved in self-doubt that we fail to see our own strengths and we fail to showcase our own strengths. So it is time to create an Indraprastha Development Board and sort of wipe out all the misperceptions of history from our books, from our mind books, because it's not even there in the books, it's not even taught as history. So we are fighting at one level to bring it into the history books. But main is the cultural landscape. You have to showcase the cultural landscape of Delhi to show Delhi as it actually has been, its journey has been, not a period of only medieval. We can have representative 2, 3 from every period, but why only one period? Unknown, remote things, किसी का नाम नहीं मालूम, but वहाँ light लग जाती है. I don't understand this. Why can't that money be used to do more creation for other parts of our history? So I'm sorry I've taken too much time because it is something which is so deeply hurting our work.
Okay, so you had 3 excellent...
You shown that? You show it now. Just answer. This is what we have done. This is an artist, youngest archaeologist of the world, 18 years old, Arsh, who is doing Egyptology, but he's a creator and he has created this. We have created this for Purana Killa, an underpass leading into the Killa, and they get a reception center there, and then we've also created the ticketing to be on Vedic style, because the Purana Killa should reveal all styles. And inside and on the boundary wall, we are showcasing the kings, 100 kings had come at the coronation and the rishis that had come. And that should be there at the entrance at the, like the boundary wall, there's fencing. The fencing should occur. So people at once should feel that this is Purana Killa, this is Indraprastha. Thank you.